Hailing back from the days of the original Medarot 1, this guardian dog statue type races on the battlefield with a fresh coat of paint and his first view of battle in nearly 20 years. This is COM00 Comadog. With a kit of Stat Cleanse, Double Beam, Wheeled Legs, and the leg ability of Extra Magazine, which grants one additional head use and passive boost to heating just for equipping this leg. Now, at time of recording, Comadog is only available if you are able to physically attend the in-person Medarot Day event for Medarot Day 2025, but if he is made available at any time after this, kindly disregard. It is still very nice to see one of the original models from Medarot 1 officially make a comeback all the same, and even better with his original kit that he's kept with him from those early days, so you really don't have to expect any major changes to what he brings to the table. Stat Cleanse on the head part is a healing attribute skill that, once activated, allows Comadog to remove negative ailments from himself and his allies, as well as negate them a certain amount of time or number of hits before it needs to be reapplied. This makes him especially useful for being able to curb anyone that tries to use negative ailments or conditional damage plus negative ailments a certain number of times by preventing them from being able to be applied or even held in long-term effect. Now granted, this does mean that it does have a short-term use of usually only about 1 or 2 hits before it expires and needs to be reapplied, but having a heating of almost 1,000 by itself means that Comadog can slap down and activate Stat Cleanse fairly quickly without anything getting in its way or fairly easily outrunning him. So on the right terrain and the right scenario, he's going to be fast enough to fire this up and get it ready before anyone else ever gets the chance to move. Beam on both arms are optic attribute skills that get a double damage bonus at 30% charge and a ×3 damage bonus at 100% charge. So they are definitely very good for being able to nuke things very quickly as long as you have CG to use them. Unfortunately, however, the thing that sets Beam apart from a number of other skills, such as Laser, Beam Sword, Hyper Beam, is the fact that it does not have any added effect or bonus effect to it. So, simply put, when you damage a part, you will be damaging that part exclusively and nothing else at all. And if you break apart and end up having a lot of carryover damage, well, that carryover damage unfortunately is not going anywhere, and essentially makes Beam very good for spot nuking. However, they both have fairly solid heating and cooling between the low 500s to high 6 or even 700s in some cases. So, much like it is with Stat Cleanse, Comadog is able to fire off a beam fairly quickly without anything outrunning him too easily. And given that he has a fairly good base power between low 1200s to low 1300s before modifiers, and his success at mid 900s to just over 1100 means he's going to be a pretty decent range fighter if you choose to use him in that respect. Wheeled Legs means that Comadog will usually trade a lot of his overall terrain compatibility for slightly better base mobility, but that usually is a very case-by-case basis. In Comadog's case, though, his stats are still fairly middling as you'd expect of a bipedal type leg, but unfortunately, Wheeled Legs also mean that he has terrible terrain compatibility on essentially everything except Road, Arena, and of course Cyber, which everybody gets S rank on anyway. But even then, his stats are still fairly solid for what he does bring to the table in that respect, even as a lower tier, even on the same tier as say like a 1-star or an F or a Friend Point Gotcha type of model. In the mobility department, Comadog is packing about 759 as a total base mobility, so he's not exactly going to be the fastest wheeled leg that you'd equip or make good use of. But given the fact that he does pack 2 heavy slots and only is using 1, it is fairly forgivable to a point based on where you're going. An evade of 891 isn't too terrible either. He's not going to dodge or graze too terribly often, but when he does, he'll let you know. A melee resist of 1446 though is really nice, as this means he can handle anything up close and personal fairly consistently, but a shoot resist of 830 does make him fairly squishy from trying to exchange pot shots with an enemy shooter, so a little bit of caution in that area is advised. In the armor department, Comadog is kind of balancing his armor, but mostly between his legs. But on top of that, he's fairly squishy, but also kind of a middle ground squishy. A head of 3059 armor isn't too terrible, little light, but not terrible. Arms at 2939 apiece means that they're also just a hair squishy, but a lot of his bulk is going to be on his legs at nearly 5,000, which honestly makes the lower mobility on his legs just a little bit more forgiving, since he's able to tank things just a little bit better there when it comes to sponging damage. All this being said, though, as a pure set score, as nice as it is to see Comadog back, unfortunately I do have to grade him a very low 3 out of 10. While, like I said, it is nice to have him back, unfortunately his original kit just doesn't serve very well in the modern arena without a lot of very serious support from an outside assistance to make him useful. First of all, stat cleanse being heavy means that he's already going to be using up one of his heavy slots, and having beam on both arms, while it isn't exactly redundant, he has exactly 0 CG sustained in any way, shape, or form, which means he can't tap into the higher damage outputs that he has potential of without someone either giving him CG or he has to spend turns charging it before he can even fire. And on top of that, the complete inability to deal piercing damage, or any kind of effective damage no less, makes him very difficult to use, and you're going to be firing a lot of beams over and over and over, and by that time, you're either halfway to dead or you're just getting ready to hit that point because Comadog is taking too long to take the enemy down. However, the leg ability of Extra Magazine is pretty nice though, as this does mean that he does get a passive heating to his head to make using Stat Cleanse a lot easier than it was before, and an extra use on top of that just because. And as squishy as he is, like I said, a lot of the bulk in his legs is still fairly nice, being able to keep that damage as low as possible without anything breaking. As mixed parts though, unfortunately I still have to grade him fairly low at a 4 out of 10, given that even though Stat Cleanse is still fairly good, it is a heavy part, so you do have to accommodate it for that. And at this point in the game, there's probably at least a few dozen Stat Cleanse parts you could use elsewhere that are heads that are also not heavy. And beam on both arms again, unless you have something to either give him charge instantly or give him an added effect, is unfortunately very pointless, even if you're able to get the CG quickly to get that double and triple damage bonus. However, having wheeled legs, even if they're a little slower with that higher HP bulk and extra magazine, you could probably find a use for them as necessary, especially given that they can support 2 heavy parts and not just 1. But again, compared to a lot of other stuff that we have in the game already, he is extremely situational, and even at best, there's still at least a couple dozen other options that you'd use faster than him.